The first four trumpets all describe a planet killer meteor impact, and I'll show you why. First, there's hailfire, blood, and burning stuff coming down, scattering across the atmosphere, and burning up all the grass. Then you have a burning mountain that falls into the sea. Then a star that hits the land and the springs. And then the sun, moon, and stars are all darkened. But there's something very interesting that they all have in common. All of them only affect 1/3 of the Earth. Now, why would that happen? That's because a meteor stream only moves in one direction, and the Earth is a sphere. So when it hits, it can only hit 1/3 of the Earth, because everything that would try to hit the rest of the Earth would pass by or deflect off or not really impact it. And yes, the evidence is only going to pile up from here. Governments around the world are spending billions of dollars to try to stop planet-killer asteroids from hitting Earth. They think they can blow them up in outer space or nudge them off course so that they won't actually make an impact. They're bragging about how they won't be affected. The Armageddon-style asteroid impact will never happen. That amazing technology explains why the golden sensor, the planet-killer meteor, actually gets fragmented, and it arrives by the time it hits Earth as hailfire, as a split in parts. One goes into the sea, one goes into the land. You can picture the movie in your head celebrating that they diverted the planet killer and absorbed the impact into the sea and all that good stuff. But it was all part of prophecy thousands of years ago, and God knew that that's what they would do, so he put it in the book. It's crazier from here. Share it! Now let's focus in on the fact that the sun, moon, and stars are all darkened for 1/3 of the day. Why does that happen? Because when 1/3 of the sky is filled up with smoke and water vapor, it can't shine. Now let's use some simple logic. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 time zones is about that length. It's 1/3 of the Earth. Question is, where does that meteor hit? You'll find out soon. The 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets are called the 3 woes. An eagle, which clearly represents a heavenly messenger, cries out in heaven to the inhabitants of the earth, telling them, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth." He says it 3 times because the other 3 trumpets are about to sound, about to blow. So the 5th angel is actually the first woe. John specifically reminds people that he saw a star that had fallen to the earth from the sky. Star is given the key to the bottomless pit. Smoke comes out of the bottomless pit as if a furnace. It darkens the sun and the air, just like we said. Locusts come out of the smoke and torment the people on earth. But only those who do not have that mark in their forehead, which is the 144,000 Israelites we mentioned earlier, will be tortured for 5 months, and they'll want to die, but they won't be allowed. Now, I have to reply to this comment. I don't want to insult the guy. I don't want to create a stumbling block for him. But this is the reason why I go interpretation from the ground up. I don't use any tradition terms. I just look at what the Bible actually says. All right, I'm going to go over the 5th seal of Revelation with no jokes and just explain it properly. So John sees a bunch of martyrs underneath an altar. Not on top of it, not as a sacrifice, but underneath, almost like kindling. And they're confused. They don't understand why God isn't avenging them yet. And instead of telling them that he's going to avenge them, they're just given white robes. They're told to wait there. And they're specifically told to wait there until their brothers and sisters who were being killed are going to finish being killed. This verse kind of debunks the idea of the rapture, or at least the idea that the rapture is something that saves the church from tribulation. There's a very good point later on where the rapture will happen to the 144,000 Israelites, not the church today, if we go into tribulation. The second woe, or 6th trumpet, gives us our first major hint about where the meteor is going to impact. 4 angels are in the river Euphrates, and they have the power to kill 1/3 of mankind. There we go with the 3rd again. And even though 1/3 of the world is killed, those who are not killed are going to keep on worshiping demons. They're guilty of murder, theft, sexual immorality, sorcery, or drug use. The Euphrates River goes up from Turkey down all the way to the Persian Gulf through Iraq. Biblically, the Euphrates River is very important, and so is Baghdad because it used to be Babylon. The Mesopotamian floodplain leading up to the Persian Gulf is where human life began. Don't believe that? Go back to Genesis 2. You'll see the river Euphrates with Eden. The meteor turns this river toxic. And of course, Israel is right over there, along with the Mediterranean Sea. Now the sixth trumpet keeps going. It's one of the longest events in Revelation. A mighty angel comes down out of heaven, a body of cloud, a rainbow around the head, a face like the sun, and feet like pillars of fire. He places his right foot on the sea and his left foot upon the earth. Now let's draw that. Now look at this. We've got two pillars of the legs going up like fiery pillars to a body of cloud that then has a sun with a rainbow around it. It's literally an image of the meteor impacts. One landed, the right one, the first one landed in the sea, remember? The second one landed on the land and was opening up the bottomless pit where all the smoke was coming from. This angel, even though it's a real angel, is clothed and manifested as the meteor impact itself to stand as a warning. So we've got our mighty angel looking sort of like that, with one foot on the sea and one foot on the land. But which sea is that? We've already deduced that the one foot on the land is probably around Turkey, because it makes the whole river toxic and this whole floodplain. So we've got the Black Sea, we've got the Mediterranean Sea, the Caspian Sea, and then down here we have the Red Sea. I think it's going to hit the Mediterranean Sea, and I'll tell you why. Because Israel is right there. And what that means is that that meteor, that golden censer that was thrown by the angel from heaven, was going to hit Israel, except it got fragmented on course and ended up splitting up, one hitting Turkey and one landing in the Mediterranean Sea. And now this quote-unquote angel, which is a real angel, will be standing straddled over this whole area, looking over Israel. You'll see why God would target Israel and why the Mediterranean Sea is so important coming up soon. The mighty angel roars like a lion. Then 7 thunders sound their voices. John is trying to write down what they're saying, but a voice from heaven tells him to seal up what they said and not write it down. The angel then says that there's going to be no more delay. In the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he sounds his trumpet, that's when the mystery of God is going to be completed, like he proclaimed to his servants, the prophets. John is then told to go and take the little scroll from the mighty angel and eat it. And it ends up making his stomach bitter, but it tastes nice in his mouth at first. Then immediately he's told it's necessary for him to prophesy in front of many tongues and nations and peoples and kings. This immediately leads to John being given a measuring stick. He has to measure the temple of God in Israel, the altar, and those worshiping in it. So Israel just dodged the biggest bullet in human history, and now the angel that's produced by that wants John to measure those in the temple there. Something's wrong here. Now let's think about Israel from John's point of view. At the time when John is writing Revelation, the temple is already destroyed by Rome. And so in the future, when he sees that there are people worshiping in the temple and there's an altar, he's initially happy. That's why the little book tastes sweet in his mouth at first. But then when he thinks about it, he realizes that doesn't add up. That's not good. John worships Jesus, and he knows that Jesus said that they should destroy the temple and that in 3 days he would raise it up. And he even explains that this refers to Jesus himself when he's resurrected. Christians are never supposed to sacrifice anymore. Jesus took away any need for more sacrifices. We also don't have a holy city. Hebrews 13 says, "For we have no permanent city, but we seek the one to come. Therefore, through him, let us continually offer up sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of our lips confessing his name." So whoever's worshiping in this temple, it ain't Christians. That's bitter. I think the 2 witnesses might be John and Ezekiel, and I'll tell you why. In Ezekiel chapter 3, he's forced to eat a scroll, and it tastes sweet as honey in his mouth, but then when he has to go do the job, he feels bitter, and it specifically uses that word. He realizes that he has to go and judge Israel and possibly condemn many of them if they don't listen to him. And John is maybe forced into that same situation. I find it very odd that John happens to become a character in the story at this exact moment when Israel enters the scene and we start to see the temple. He has to measure the people inside immediately before we see the two witnesses come onto the scene. And the angel just told John that he had to prophesy in front of many people and kings and nations, but John never actually did that after he wrote the book of Revelation. The only time to do it would be in the events of Revelation, but he wouldn't know that he is that person in the story. We are still in the sixth trumpet here, also called the second woe. And this is all leading up to something. It all ends up coming towards Israel. But there's a very troubling undertone here where Israel doesn't seem to actually be holy anymore. There's something wrong with it. And these two witnesses are coming to witness against Israel and to show them that they need to turn away from evil, it seems like. You might not believe that, but we're going to make the argument as we go forward here. The two witnesses are killed by the beast, which comes up out of that bottomless pit to make war with them. But look at this. Their bodies will be in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. There is only one city in the world where the Lord was crucified, and that is Jerusalem. If you haven't figured it out yet, it seems like Jerusalem has made a deal with the devil. This leads up to the biggest turning point in Revelation. I think there's an alliance between Jerusalem and the beast by the time the two witnesses come in Revelation. This explains why the beast comes there to stop the two witnesses on their behalf. Nobody likes those two witnesses. They all celebrate afterwards. We'll look at that. After they're dead, it says, "Those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and make merry and send gifts because those two prophets have tormented those dwelling on the earth." Now, since Jerusalem isn't relying on God for salvation, and in fact is killing God's prophets, that just shows you how evil Jerusalem has become at this future point, right? But the Jerusalem people don't do it themselves. They let the beast handle the dirty work. And the whole mystery of why Jerusalem would ever team up with the beast is what explains the coming chapters that people get so mixed up. You're supposed to be thinking, why would the beast team up with Israel? After 3.5 days, the Spirit of God enters back into those two witnesses and they stand up. Everyone becomes terrified who looks at that. And they hear the voice saying, "Come up here." And those two witnesses go up to heaven in a cloud. And the enemies beheld them. Now here's the critical part. A great earthquake comes. And that earthquake causes 1/10 of Jerusalem to crumble. And after 7,000 men are killed in that earthquake, the rest became terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. This is the climax that leads to the second woe passing. The fact that Jerusalem is now giving glory to God is the climax. That is the most important thing that everything else has been leading up to. It's easy to miss just how epic the struggle to recapture Jerusalem has been. But when you realize that the meteor coming down, the death, the third of the world being destroyed essentially, and Israel being at the center of it, looking at it all, then you realize that it's not just about this earthquake that destroys 1/10 of Jerusalem. We've had the two witnesses. They were doing plagues. We had the beast coming and killing them, and then God giving them life again. This is a movie. This is an epic story. Books should be written about how this plays out. After the beast seemingly succeeds in killing the two witnesses, God has the last laugh. He brings them up, and then an earthquake comes and destroys part of Jerusalem, killing 7,000 of them. And 7,000 is a tiny number, but depending on who those people are, it could send a powerful message to the rest. What if it's the Jerusalem government or something like that? So now we see that the second woe is the recapture of Jerusalem. The inhabitants of Jerusalem have just started giving glory to the God of heaven, and now we're told that the third woe is coming quickly. So the seventh angel sounds his trumpet, and those in heaven start singing this song about how the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of the Lord and Christ. And this is directly connected with the fact that Jerusalem was just recaptured by God, implying that Jerusalem was sort of the capital city of the New World Order at that time. Recapturing Jerusalem is the same as the kingdoms of this world becoming that of the Christ. The people in heaven are happy because God has finally begun to reign on the earth. And remember that this mighty angel said that all the mysteries would be fulfilled in the age of the seventh trumpet. The seventh trumpet is the third woe. It unlocks these 7 vials of wrath. Once you realize that Satan has deceived Jerusalem into becoming the capital of the New World Order, then it makes perfect sense why, after Jesus recaptures Jerusalem from Satan, he decides to give them a big history lesson. This history lesson is literally displayed in heaven as a great wonder that they can all see on earth. In other words, Revelation 12 is not a time skip to a different place, but a continuation of the same timeline following exactly what just barely happened. Jerusalem was recaptured by Jesus, and now they're the ones being shown the history of how Jerusalem got to where it is. And so begins this history lesson of the Christian church, the woman crowned with 12 stars, about to deliver a baby. God wants these freshly converted people in Jerusalem to understand that the church was right all along. And he's also going to expose the true nature of the beast that they've been sleeping with.